As a former newspaperman, I'd kept my eyes on the McMinn County political machine for the past 6 years, and during that period I'd written stories about ballot box stealing and had watched Representative John Jennings in his fight to put an end to the wretched political practices. The congressman had failed. I might point out that the political machine was the Democratic Party, and the county is considered Republican. Getting up to the day of action, August 1st, Alan Stout and I arrived in Athens about 1 hour before the polls closed at 4 o'clock. Arrangements for our equipment and lines for our broadcast from Athens had been made 6 days before. Just as soon as we arrived, we made a tour of the voting precincts and learned that one GI judge had been removed from the first precinct. At least 250 special deputies, some of them imported from outside the county and the state, were patrolling the streets with their pistols and shiny badges. Small groups of citizens, talking softly, moved up and down the streets. We went to the jail to interview the sheriff. While we were there, a deputy, Wendy Wise, led an elderly Negro, Tom Gillespie, into the jail. The deputy announced, and I quote, "I've just shot him. What do you want me to do with him?" Another deputy was instructed to take the Negro to the hospital. He had been shot in the side. We then went back to the precinct at the courthouse. I walked in just before the polls closed. A large group of churchwomen walked up to the door. One of the ladies requested me to ask the armed election official if he would permit them to watch the counting of the ballots. His answer was to wait until it was time to close the polls and see. A second later, the policeman standing at the door slammed it in my face with these words, "The polls have closed." The door was locked. Just a short time before, a GI judge, Bob Harrell, was beaten with a blackjack by a deputy at one of the precincts. At 4:45, just 1 hour before our first scheduled broadcast, two GI watchers, Charles Scott Jr. and Ed Vestal, crashed through the plate glass of the precinct where they were held virtually as prisoners. Sheriff Mansfield and a car filled with deputies arrived on the scene, and the ballot box was taken from the precinct to the jail. Enraged citizens stepped forward as if they might attempt to take the ballot box from the deputies. 15 armed officers pulled their pistols, and the motion stopped. Thus, the lead on our first broadcast was, quote, "The political powder keg of East Tennessee has exploded and violence has broken out here in Athens." Just before that broadcast, angry GIs, using their bare fists, rounded up several special deputies and hauled them out of town. At 7:30, the GIs began gathering at their headquarters, and 15 minutes later, they marched on the jail and demanded the return of the ballot box the deputies took from the polling precinct. Our second broadcast at 8:30 ended, quote, "A crowd is converging on the county jail at this time, but no violence has been reported. Everyone here acts as if they were waiting for a time bomb to explode. That may happen. All women have just been ordered off the streets," unquote. The sheriff refused to hand over the ballot box to the GIs, and the firing on the jail started at 10 minutes after 9. It lasted for about 6 hours when the deputies surrendered the jail. But here's Alan Stout to tell you about the conditions under which he worked to give you one of the most vivid broadcasts heard in a long, long time.
Yes, Frank, it might be well to explain to our listeners the conditions under which we were broadcasting. As Frank Larkin stated, we were set up in the headquarters of the then powerful political machine of Paul Cantrell. In view of the fact that we had gained those facilities by promising not to editorialize nor attempt to analyze the news from Athens, but just to report the facts, we naturally felt that it behooved us to stand by that promise, not only from the standpoint of integrity, but also from the standpoint of personal safety. We had done 3 reports from our location prior to the start of the shooting, each time making sure to report only facts with no comment on our part as to what we might think about the general Athens situation. Then, shortly after 9 p.m. Athens time, the action began. It seemed as if the whole world had suddenly exploded. A barrage of gunfire that was not only startling but terrifying broke the silence of that August 1st night. We did not know at the time of the attack. Therefore, we assumed that it was gunfire in the streets between the deputies and the GIs. Immediately, we turned out the light, got on the floor behind a brick wall, and started broadcasting the noise and a brief description of the activities. In view of the fact that the gunfire seemed to be only a few feet from our window, we naturally did not want to give our location away, so all the description was done in a hushed voice. After all, a stray bullet is just as deadly as an accurately aimed one if it hits you. And as feeling was running high between both sides, we dared not antagonize either side with any comment we might make to the radio audience. from a crouched position on the floor, and later from a straight-back chair securely situated behind a brick wall, we proceeded to tell the Athens story. For approximately 6 hours, Frank Larkin darted in and out of our broadcasting location to advise me of the activity just outside in the inky blackness. At that time, our listeners heard something like this.
Eastern Standard Time as we take you to Allen South, somewhere in McMinn County. Come in, Allen.
Ladies and gentlemen, suddenly a hubbub of activity has taken place here. One of the loudest explosions we have heard since the firing started. There is another one. The people are running. Some are yelling, and we don't know what the activity is. But there had been sporadic firing up until that period. There is another shot. It sounds very much like a grenade or a small bomb. Just what it is, whether it's a signal or what, I don't know, but activity is beginning to pick up. You can hear the firing in the background. People are running, hurrying, scurrying here and there to find out just what it is, and we might add that several hundred people are still on the streets here at this hour of the morning. Of course, here it is only 15 minutes until 3 a.m. in Athens, in McMinn County. But the firing has suddenly picked up, and this may be the long-awaited attack which was discussed earlier in the evening. If you recall, we told you that it was rumored that some of the GIs who were hostages in the jail were to be released. There was a truce for that, and the truce time was up. We were informed quite a while ago, but no additional activity took place. We assumed maybe the GIs had been released, or that the planned attack would not go off. And for a moment there, it seemed as if the attack had started, but now it's begun to subside again. There were two terrific explosions. Now there's a Tommy gun, you can hear it in the distance, or a submachine gun. And the firing has ceased again. The only reports we're getting are very scattered, and the last time we talked to you, we mentioned the fact that 10 persons have been injured in this shooting thus far to our knowledge. Only 2 have been hospitalized. The jail had a very badly shot up leg, was taken to the hospital, was obtained, and it is understood that blood plasma has been asked from Knoxville for him. All of these reports come to us in widely diversified manners. We get them as quickly as we can and pass them along to you. And we'll tell you once again that in case you just tuned in or haven't been listening to these broadcasts, that we're speaking in total blackness from our broadcasting location in McMinn County. We're using no script. We're sitting here talking as quietly as we possibly can because activity is not too far removed from our location. We have had no further increase in the shooting that just started as we came on the air with this broadcast. But there certainly was a moving and hurrying of feet and an excited sound in the voices of the people as they moved over towards the firing line. Perhaps they, too, had heard the rumor that an attack was about to be made and thought perhaps they would see it. We cannot tell what number of the shots, if any, are in retaliation to the attackers. It is impossible in the inky blackness from where we are to distinguish whether or not any shots are coming from the jail. We have been advised, however, that the telephone service is out. The lights were burning at the last report. We cannot tell you yet whether they are out completely, but we'll await further developments. And now from McMinn County.
The climax of the battle, which you just heard described, came with the 4th discharge of dynamite which was tossed at the McMinn County jail. At this point, the deputies came out of the jail, hands raised high above their heads, and the story of the siege of the McMinn County jail was history. However, there are still headlines of turmoil and strife coming from McMinn County. When it will be settled, not even the principals themselves seem to know. But it was historical, to say the least.